Champagne flutes shattered against the marble floor of the Pierre Hotel, silencing the room instantly. But the loudest sound wasn't the breaking glass, it was the whisper that followed. Lydia, draped in a $40,000 gown paid for by corporate funds, leaned into Violetta's ear and smiled. "He's leaving you tonight. I've already decorated the penthouse." She thought she held the winning hand. She thought she had stolen the king. She didn't realize that Violetta wasn't just the queen. She was the one who owned the board, the pieces, and the bank that funded the entire game. And checkmate was already called. The air inside the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel in Manhattan tasted of expensive perfume, old money, and betrayal. It was the annual Helios Ventures Winter Gala, a night where New York's elite gathered to pretend they liked one another while eyeing net worths like vultures circling a carcass. Violetta stood near the ice sculpture, her posture impeccable. She wore a velvet gown the color of midnight, high-necked and long-sleeved, a stark contrast to the flesh-bearing trends of the season. She held a glass of sparkling water, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She wasn't looking for friends. She was looking for flaws. And the biggest flaw in her life was currently standing 20 feet away, laughing too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. Andrew, her husband of 10 years, the CEO of Helios Ventures. He looked dashing in his bespoke tuxedo from Savile Row, the one Violetta had selected for him 3 months ago. He was charming the investors, his smile bright and practiced. Hanging onto his arm, looking less like an executive assistant and more like a trophy being polished, was Lydia. Lydia was 24, ambitious, and currently wearing a diamond necklace that Violetta recognized. It wasn't because she owned it, but because she had approved the expense report for client appreciation gifts just last week. The invoice from Cartier had been flagged by accounting, but Violetta had let it slide. At the time, she thought it was a bribe for a difficult supplier in Dubai. Now, seeing the diamonds resting against Lydia's throat, the math changed. "She's bold, I'll give her that," a voice drawled beside Violetta. Violetta didn't flinch. She turned slightly to see Beatrice, her oldest friend and personal attorney, sipping a martini. "Bold implies courage, Beatrice," Violetta said, her voice a cool, calm river. "This is just recklessness. Recklessness is messy." "He's been parading her around for an hour," Beatrice noted, her eyes narrowing behind her glasses, "introducing her as the head of creative strategy. Since when does Helios have a head of creative strategy?" "Since Andrew decided he needed a title to justify her travel stipend," Violetta replied, taking a sip of water. "I checked the payroll this morning. She's making more than the chief financial officer." Beatrice choked on her olive. "And you're standing here drinking water? Viv, destroy him. Right now, I have the papers in my car." "Not yet," Violetta whispered. "The stock price is up 3 points this week because of the rumored merger with Novacorp. If I blow up his reputation tonight, the merger fails and I lose value. I don't lose value, Beatrice. Ever." Across the room, Andrew caught Violetta's eye. For a second, his smile faltered. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. But then Lydia whispered something in his ear, and his arrogance returned. He patted Lydia's hand and began walking toward his wife. The mistress was coming to pay her respects, or rather, to inspect the ruins she thought she had created. Lydia walked with a strut that belonged on a runway, not a corporate gala. Up close, she was undeniably beautiful, youthful, glowing, and smelling of vanilla and ambition. She stopped in front of Violetta, smiling with a sweetness that was entirely manufactured. "Mrs. Cross," Lydia said, extending a hand. "It's so lovely to finally meet you properly. Andrew talks about you. Occasionally." The slight was subtle, sharp, and intentional. Violetta looked at the hand, then up at Lydia's face. She didn't take it. Lydia, isn't it? The creative strategist. I enjoyed your memo on rebranding. It had a lot of pictures. Lydia's smile tightened. Visuals are the future, Mrs. Cross, but I suppose traditionalists prefer spreadsheets. Andrew stepped in, placing a protective hand on Lydia's lower back, a gesture so intimate it made Beatrice stiffen beside them. Now, Andrew laughed nervously. Let's not talk shop. Violetta, darling, you look tired. Have you been sleeping? I sleep fine, Andrew, Violetta said, her gaze locking onto his. It's the waking up that's been interesting lately. Lydia let out a small, tinkling laugh. She took a step closer to Violetta, invading her personal space. Under the cover of the loud jazz band starting a new set, Lydia leaned in. To an observer, it looked like a polite exchange of pleasantries. He's leaving you, Lydia whispered, her voice low and venomous. Tonight. After the speech. I've already picked out the curtains for the penthouse on Park Avenue. You know, the one with the view you love so much? Violetta's expression didn't change. Not a flicker of pain, not a twitch of anger. She simply looked at Lydia, as one might look at a stain on a silk blouse, annoying but removable. The penthouse, Violetta repeated calmly. Unit 4B. 4A, Lydia corrected smugly. The corner unit. The big one. Ah, Violetta said. The one with the heated floors in the master bath. Exactly, Lydia beamed, thinking she had drawn blood. He says I bring him peace. He says you just bring him deadlines. Andrew cleared his throat, sensing the tension, but oblivious to the words exchanged. We should go prepare for the speech, Lydia. The investors are waiting. Go ahead, my love, Lydia said to him, keeping her eyes on Violetta. I'll catch up. As Andrew walked away, Lydia dropped the facade entirely. Don't make a scene when he serves the papers, Violetta. It's embarrassing for everyone. Just take your settlement and go buy some cats. You were good for the startup phase, but Helios is a global brand now. It needs a face that matches the future. Violetta finally smiled. It was a terrifying, small thing. You're right, Lydia, Violetta said softly. The future is very important. Enjoy the speech. I hear the ending is a surprise. Lydia smirked, turned on her heel, and sauntered away to join Andrew near the podium. Beatrice exhaled loudly. I'm going to need a stiff drink if you don't tell me what your plan is. She just told you she's stealing your husband and your favorite apartment. Violetta set her glass down on a passing waiter's tray. She smoothed the velvet of her dress. She can't steal the apartment, Beatrice. Why not? Andrew's name is on the lease. No, Violetta corrected. Andrew's name is on the mailbox. The lease is held by a shell company called Valkyrie Properties. And who owns Valkyrie? Violetta turned to her friend, her eyes glinting like the diamonds Lydia was wearing. I do. Just like I own the car she arrived in, the corporate card she bought that dress with, and the insurance policy on the merger they're celebrating. Andrew thinks he's the CEO of Helios Ventures. He forgets that Helios is a subsidiary. Of what? Of Vanguard Holdings, Violetta said, checking her Patek Philippe watch, which is solely owned by me. He's an employee, Beatrice, and he's about to have a very bad performance review. To understand the magnitude of the mistake Andrew and Lydia were making, one had to look back 10 years. New York City, a decade ago, was a different beast. Andrew Cross was a handsome, charismatic visionary with a charming smile and a bank account that was constantly overdrawn. He had ideas, big, loud ideas about tech integration and lifestyle branding, but he had zero discipline. He was the kind of man who would order a $1,000 bottle of wine to celebrate a contract he hadn't signed yet. Violetta, on the other hand, was invisible. She was Violetta Prescott back then, the quiet daughter of a steel magnate who had taught her that money was loudest when it was silent. When her father passed, he left her everything, but he tied it up in trusts and holding companies so complex that even the IRS had trouble tracking the flow. He wanted her safe. He wanted her hidden from the fortune hunters. She met Andrew at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. He was arguing with a landlord on the phone. She was reading a book on contract law. He borrowed a pen. He forgot to return it. They went to dinner. Andrew fell in love with her stability. Violetta fell in love with his spark. He was everything she wasn't: loud, vibrant, risky. When they married, Violetta made a choice. She knew Andrew's ego was fragile. If he knew she was worth hundreds of millions, he would feel emasculated. Or worse, he would become lazy. So, she presented herself as comfortably middle class. She told him she had a small inheritance from her grandmother, enough to help him start his business, Helios, but not enough to retire on. "We build this together," she had told him on their wedding night. And they did. Or rather, she built it, and he stood in front of it. Violetta set up the corporate structure. She remained a silent partner, listed in the paperwork only as the representative for the primary investor, Vanguard Holdings. She told Andrew that Vanguard was a group of old, faceless investors from Zurich who preferred anonymity. "I handle the investors, you handle the public," she had said. For 10 years it worked. Andrew played the part of the genius CEO. He gave the TED Talks, he did the Forbes interviews, he took the credit. Violetta sat in the back office, managing the books, approving the budgets, and ensuring Vanguard, her, kept 51% of the voting shares. She controlled the board. She controlled the purse strings. But she never pulled them tight. She wanted Andrew to feel powerful. She loved him. She thought they were a team, until 6 months ago. That was when the business trips to Miami started increasing. That was when Helios hired Lydia, a 20-something influencer with zero corporate experience, as a consultant. Violetta wasn't jealous initially. She was pragmatic. She checked the output. Lydia produced nothing. No reports, no strategies, just Instagram posts of herself in bikinis on boats that Violetta realized were rented on the corporate dime. Tonight, at the Pierre Hotel, the history lesson was over. The reality was setting in. Violetta watched from the shadows of the ballroom as Andrew took the stage. The spotlight hit him, and he beamed. He looked like a king. "Ladies and gentlemen," Andrew's voice boomed over the speakers. "Thank you for coming. Tonight is a celebration of growth, of new horizons." He looked down at Lydia, who was standing in the front row, clapping adoringly. "I want to thank my team," Andrew continued, "and specifically the fresh talent that has revitalized our brand vision this year." He didn't mention his wife. He didn't mention the woman who had stayed up until 4 a.m. 3 nights in a row last week, fixing the audit reports, so he wouldn't go to jail for negligence. Violetta felt a vibration in her clutch. It was her phone. A text from her private investigator, a man named Cohen, who used to work for Mossad and charged by the hour in gold bullion. Cohen. The transfer went through. He moved $500,000 from the operational account to a private LLC registered to Lydia this afternoon. Subject line, Interior Design Consulting. Violetta stared at the screen. That was the line. Infidelity was one thing. Violetta could almost forgive a physical lapse if he came back groveling. She was a pragmatist. But embezzlement? Stealing from her company to build a nest egg for his mistress? That was theft. That was war. She typed a reply. Execute Phase 1. On stage, Andrew was winding up. "And so I am proud to announce that Helios is looking toward a future where we shed the old weight and fly freely. To the future. To the future, the crowd toasted. Violetta raised her glass of water. To the future, she whispered. She turned to Beatrice. I need to go to the ladies' room. Then, I need you to find the chairman of the board. He's over by the buffet, eating shrimp. Mr. Henderson? Beatrice asked. He's terrifying. He's my godfather, Violetta revealed, dropping another bomb casually. Tell him Vanguard is calling an emergency session. Tonight, in the hotel suite upstairs. Beatrice's jaw dropped. Violetta, are you serious? Deadly. And Beatrice? Yes. Make sure Lydia is invited to the after party in the suite. I want her to be there when the locks get changed. Violetta walked out of the ballroom, her heels clicking a rhythm of imminent destruction on the marble. As she entered the quiet sanctuary of the restroom, she moved to the mirror. She reapplied her lipstick, a shade called blood red. The door opened behind her. It was Lydia again. Of course it was. The mistress couldn't resist a victory lap. Lydia washed her hands next to Violetta, humming a tune. You know, Lydia said, watching Violetta in the mirror, I almost feel bad for you. It must be hard, being the woman behind the man, and then realizing the man doesn't want you there anymore. Violetta capped her lipstick. She turned slowly. Lydia, do you know how Helios Ventures got its name? Lydia blinked, confused by the pivot. Andrew said he chose it because he's like the sun. Bright. Essential. Violetta laughed. It was a genuine, dark laugh. No, I chose it. Helios was the Greek god who drove the chariot of the sun across the sky. But do you know what happened if someone else tried to drive that chariot? Lydia rolled her eyes. I don't do mythology. I do reality. They burned, Violetta said, her voice dropping an octave. They lost control, the horses went wild, and they burned the earth until Zeus had to strike them down. Is that a threat? Lydia scoffed. Please, what are you going to do? Cut up his credit cards? He has his own money now. Does he? Violetta asked. Or does he have a salary that I approve? A bonus structure that I sign off on? And a golden parachute that I just perforated? Lydia frowned. A flicker of doubt crossed her perfect face. You're crazy. You're just a housewife who got lucky marrying a genius. We'll see, Violetta said, grabbing her clutch. By the way, that dress? It's a write-off. Make sure you keep the receipt. The IRS is very particular about taxable benefits for non-employees. Violetta walked out, leaving Lydia standing in the bathroom, the silence suddenly feeling very heavy. Upstairs, in the presidential suite, the real meeting was about to begin. Andrew thought the night ended with champagne and a mistress. Violetta knew it ended with blood on the floor. She took the elevator up to the 40th floor. The doors opened, and 2 security guards she had hired that morning were waiting. Mrs. Cross? One of them nodded. The board is assembled. Good, Violetta said, stepping into the hallway. Let's go fire my husband. The penthouse at the Pierre Hotel was not just a room. It was a declaration of supremacy. With floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, which was currently a vast rectangle of darkness and city lights, the suite cost $12,000 a night. Andrew and Lydia didn't care about the cost. In their minds, they owned the city. They had left the gala early, skipping the tedious, polite conversation to celebrate their new era in private. Andrew had loosened his tie, tossing his jacket onto a velvet armchair. Lydia was barefoot, spinning in the center of the living room, holding a bottle of Dom Perignon that she had ordered from room service. Did you see her face? Lydia laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. She looked like a statue, a sad old statue. Andrew poured himself a glass, feeling the warmth of the alcohol and the adrenaline of his secret life finally becoming public. Violetta is consistent, he said, trying to sound diplomatic but failing. She's safe. But safe doesn't build empires, Lydia. You are the spark. Lydia rushed over and wrapped her arms around his neck. I'm not just the spark, Andrew. I'm the fire. And now that we're together, really together, Helios is going to explode. We'll do the rebrand, get rid of those boring legacy investors, and take the company public properly. Andrew kissed her, but a small frown creased his forehead. The investors? Yes, we need to handle them carefully. Vanguard Holdings is notoriously stiff. They might not like the optics of a divorce right before a merger. Screw Vanguard, Lydia scoffed, pulling away to sip her champagne. They're just money. You're the brain. If they give you trouble, we'll walk. We'll start something new. Everyone knows Helios is you. Andrew smiled, his ego stroked to perfection. You're right. They need me. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. Andrew glanced at it. It was a notification from his banking app. Transaction declined. The Pierre Hotel. Room service. 850 euros Açores. He frowned. That was odd. He had a black card with a limit that could buy a small island. He picked up the phone and dismissed the notification, assuming it was a glitch. He tried to order another bottle of champagne through the app. Error. Card suspended. Please contact your financial institution. Is everything okay? Lydia asked, noticing his change in demeanor. Fine, just a bank glitch, Andrew muttered. Probably triggered a fraud alert because of the jewelry purchase earlier. I'll sort it out in the morning. But the buzzing didn't stop. Another notification, then an email. Subject, emergency board summons. Andrew froze. He opened the email. It was from the corporate secretary of Helios Ventures. Mr. Cross, you are hereby summoned to an emergency session of the board of directors to be held immediately in conference room B on the 4th floor. Attendance is mandatory. The representative from Vanguard Holdings has called for a vote of no confidence. What the hell? Andrew whispered. What is it? Lydia asked, sensing the shift in the room's energy. The board, Andrew said, his face paling. They're meeting. Now. Downstairs. Why? The Vanguard rep called it a vote of no confidence. Andrew ran a hand through his hair, his earlier confidence evaporating like mist. Violetta must have said something. She must have told Beatrice, and Beatrice called someone. Lydia's eyes narrowed. So what? Go down there and charm them. You're the CEO. Tell them Violetta is a bitter, soon-to-be ex-wife who is trying to sabotage the company out of spite. They'll believe you. Men always believe the rational man over the emotional woman. Andrew looked at Lydia, and for the first time, he saw her not as a muse, but as a liability. But he pushed the thought away. She was right. He was the golden boy. He was the face of the company. I need to go, Andrew said, grabbing his jacket. You stay here? No, Lydia said firmly. I'm coming with you. I'm the head of creative strategy. If they're going to discuss the future of the company, I should be there. Plus, she smirked, it will show them we aren't hiding. We are a power couple. Andrew hesitated. Bringing his mistress to a board meeting called to discuss his conduct was suicidal, but his arrogance overruled his logic. He wanted to show them he wasn't afraid. Fine, he said. But let me do the talking. We're going to walk in there, crush this rebellion, and then come back up here and finish this bottle. They left the penthouse, stepping into the elevator. Andrew adjusted his cufflinks, checking his reflection in the mirrored walls. He looked tired, but he told himself he looked distinguished. As the elevator descended, Andrew's phone buzzed again. A text from his CFO, a man named Gary. Gary. They locked me out of the system, Andrew. I can't access the accounts. Who is the Valkyrie Trust? Andrew stared at the screen. The Valkyrie Trust? He had never heard of it. The elevator doors pinged open on the 4th floor. The hallway was quiet, lined with dark mahogany and plush carpet. Security guards stood outside the double doors of Conference Room B. They weren't the usual hotel security. These men were wearing suits that cost more than Andrew's car. "Mr. Cross," one of the guards said, stepping aside. "They are waiting for you." "And Miss Bennet," Andrew added, gesturing to Lydia. The guard didn't even look at her. "Miss Bennet is not on the list." "She's a senior executive," Andrew snapped. "She comes in." The guard paused, touched his earpiece, and listened to a voice on the other end. He nodded. "Very well. Let her witness it." "Witness it?" The phrasing sent a chill down Andrew's spine. Andrew pushed the doors open and strode in, Lydia clicking along beside him. The conference room was imposing. A long, oval table dominated the space. Seated around it were the 5 members of the board. There was Mr. Henderson, the chairman, a man of 70 with eyes like flint. There was Mrs. Galloway, representing the tech investors. There was Mr. Pierce, the legal counsel, and 2 others Andrew didn't recognize, suits from Zurich, he assumed. But the chair at the head of the table, the seat reserved for the majority shareholder, the representative of Vanguard Holdings, was turned away from the door, facing the window. "Gentlemen, and Mrs. Galloway," Andrew announced, his voice booming. "I apologize for the interruption to your evening. I assume this sudden meeting is due to some domestic rumors that have circulated." He placed his hands on the table, leaning forward in a power pose. "Let me be clear. My personal life does not affect my ability to lead Helios. The merger with Novacorp is on track. Our stock is at an all-time high. If this is an attempt to leverage my divorce settlement, I assure you, it won't work." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. He didn't look at Andrew. He looked at the papers in front of him. "This meeting is not about rumors, Mr. Cross," Henderson said, his voice gravelly. "It is about theft, corporate malfeasance, and breach of fiduciary duty." "Theft?" Andrew laughed incredulously. "I built this company. How can I steal from myself?" "That is the common misconception," Henderson said. "You do not own this company, Andrew. You own 51% of the founder's shares. Vanguard Holdings owns 60%, and Vanguard is very unhappy." "I demand to speak to the Vanguard representative." Andrew slammed his hand on the table. "I've been asking for a meeting with them for 5 years. Stop hiding behind proxies. If they have a problem with me, they can say it to my face." Slowly, the high-backed leather chair at the head of the table began to turn. Lydia let out a small, confused gasp. Andrew's eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Sitting in the chair was not a Swiss banker. It was not a faceless bureaucrat. It was Violeta. She was no longer wearing the velvet gown. She had changed into a sharp, white power suit that looked like it had been cut from ice. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, perfect bun. She wore reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked at Andrew over the rim of the glasses. "Hello, Andrew," Violeta said. "You wanted to speak to Vanguard. I'm listening." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens after a bomb goes off, before the screaming starts. Andrew stared at his wife. He blinked, trying to make the image make sense. Violeta? His Violeta. The woman who baked sourdough bread on Sundays and complained about the neighbors' loud music. The woman he had cheated on, lied to, and planned to discard like an old coat. "Violeta?" he choked out. What are you doing there? Get out of that chair. That's for the major shareholder." "I am the major shareholder, Andrew," Violeta said calmly. She tapped a finger on the leather armrest. I am Vanguard Holdings. I always have been. Lydia stepped forward, her face flushed with anger and confusion. This is a joke, she spat. She's lying. Andrew, she's lying. She's just a housewife. She's trying to psych you out. Violetta didn't even look at Lydia. She spoke to the room. Mr. Henderson, please read the first item on the agenda. Mr. Henderson nodded solemnly. Item 1. Review of unauthorized expenditures by the CEO. He slid a thick folder across the table toward Andrew. It hit the wood with a heavy thud. Open it, Violetta commanded. Andrew's hands were shaking as he opened the folder. Inside were copies of bank statements, credit card receipts, and wire transfers. Page 1, Violetta recited from memory. October 14th. Purchase of a Cartier diamond necklace, value $45,000, charged to client acquisition. The recipient was not a client. It was Ms. Bennett. Violetta's eyes flicked to Lydia's neck. It looks lovely, Lydia, but company policy prohibits keeping corporate assets for personal use. You'll be receiving an invoice for that later. Page 3, Violetta continued, her voice relentless. November 2nd, charter flight to Cabo San Lucas, listed as Investor Relations Retreat. Passenger manifest lists only Andrew Cross and Lydia Bennett. Cost to company, $32,000. Page 10, Violetta said, leaning forward. This one is my favorite. A wire transfer of $500,000 initiated today to Lydia B. Interiors for consulting services. Andrew, Helios is a tech firm. Why are we paying $500,000 for interior design advice from a woman whose only qualification is a failed fashion blog? Andrew slammed the folder shut. Sweat was beading on his forehead. I can explain these. These are strategic investments. Relationship building. I have discretion as CEO. You have discretion up to $10,000, Violetta corrected. Anything above that requires board approval. You bypassed the approval process by splitting the payments. That's called structuring. It's a federal crime, Andrew. Andrew felt the room spinning. He looked at the other board members. They were all looking at him with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. Violetta, Andrew pleaded, his voice cracking. Baby, please, don't do this here. Let's go home. Let's talk about this. I made a mistake, okay? I messed up. But don't burn the company down just to hurt me. I'm not burning it down, Violetta said. I'm fireproofing it. She stood up. She wasn't tall, but in that moment, she looked 10 feet high. I built this company, Andrew. I wrote the code for the original algorithm while you were sleeping. I designed the corporate structure. I funded the seed round with my inheritance. I let you play CEO because it made you happy. I let you have the spotlight because I didn't need it. All I asked for was loyalty. She walked around the table, approaching him. You broke the contract, she whispered. I can fix it, Andrew stammered. I'll fire Lydia, right now. Lydia, you're fired. Get out! Lydia gasped, recoiling as if slapped. Andrew, you coward! Get out! Andrew screamed at her, desperate to save his own skin. You're nothing. You're just a distraction. Violetta, look, she's gone. It's just us. We can fix this. Violetta watched the display with cold detachment. Pathetic, she murmured. She turned back to the board. I call for a vote. Motion to remove Andrew Cross as CEO of Helios Ventures, effective immediately, for cause. All in favor? Aye, said Mr. Henderson. Aye, said Mrs. Galloway. Aye, said Mr. Pierce. Aye, said the two men from Zurich. The motion carries unanimously, Violetta said. You are terminated, Andrew. You will surrender your company phone, your laptop, and your keycard. Security will escort you out. You can't do this, Andrew shouted, his face turning red. I am Helios. The stock will tank without me. The merger will fail. Actually, Violetta interrupted, I spoke to the CEO of NovaCorp an hour ago. He was very interested to hear that the real brain behind Helios was finally stepping out of the shadows. He's excited to work with me. The merger is proceeding. Under my name." She gestured to the guards. 2 large men stepped forward, flanking Andrew. "One more thing," Violetta said, stopping them. "The penthouse." Andrew looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "Yes? Can I stay there tonight, just to pack?" "No," Violetta said. "I cancelled the lease an hour ago. Your things are currently being packed into boxes by the hotel staff. They will be left on the curb. It's raining, Andrew. I suggest you hurry." She turned to Lydia, who was standing in the corner, crying silent, angry tears. "And Lydia," Violetta said. Lydia looked up, mascara running down her cheeks. "That $500,000 transfer." Violetta smiled. "I reversed it before the bank closed. But I did forward the transaction attempt to the IRS. They find wire fraud very interesting. You might want to call a lawyer." Violetta turned her back on them and sat down in the chairman's seat. "Get them out of my boardroom." The guards grabbed Andrew by the arms. He didn't fight. He was too in shock. He was dragged out of the room, his expensive shoes scuffing the carpet. Lydia ran after him, sobbing, her heels clacking frantically. When the doors closed, the room fell silent again. Violetta took a deep breath. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She felt lighter than she had in years. Mr. Henderson looked at her with a mix of fear and respect. "Well done, Violetta. What is the next step?" Violetta picked up the pen Andrew had left on the table. It was the one he had borrowed from her 10 years ago in the coffee shop. He had kept it as a lucky charm. She snapped it in half. "The next step," Violetta said, "is to make sure they never climb back up." The sidewalk outside the Pierre Hotel was slick with rain, reflecting the neon chaos of Fifth Avenue. It was a cold, miserable downpour, the kind that soaks through wool and dignity in equal measure. Andrew Cross stood next to a pile of soggy cardboard boxes, staring at the revolving doors he had just been ejected from. He was still wearing his tuxedo, but without the jacket, he looked like a waiter who had been fired mid-shift. His hair, usually coiffed to perfection, was plastered to his forehead. Beside him, Lydia was screaming into her phone, trying to summon an Uber. "Declined? What do you mean declined?" she shrieked, tapping furiously at the screen. "Try the other card. The Amex." "It won't work," Andrew said, his voice hollow. He was sitting on a box labeled Kitchen, Misk, that was rapidly disintegrating in the puddle. She froze everything, Lydia. The corporate cards, the joint accounts, even the emergency line of credit. Lydia turned on him, her mascara streaking down her face like war paint. "So you have nothing? You told me you were rich. You told me you were the king of New York." "I was," Andrew shouted back, the frustration finally erupting. "I was until an hour ago. She took it all. She owns Vanguard. I didn't know." "You didn't know your wife owned the holding company that signs your paychecks?" Lydia scoffed, kicking one of his boxes. "God, you are an idiot. You're not a genius, Andrew. You're a mascot." A flash of light blinded them. Then another. Andrew shielded his eyes. Paparazzi. They swarmed like gnats. Beatrice had clearly been busy. She must have tipped off the press the moment the board meeting started. "Andrew! Andrew, over here!" a photographer shouted. "Is it true you embezzled company funds to buy your mistress a condo?" "Lydia, is the necklace real, or is it a fake like the expense report?" "Mr. Cross, how does it feel to be fired by your wife?" Andrew grabbed a wet newspaper from the top of a trash can and tried to cover his face, but it was too late. The images were already being uploaded. Helios crash was trending on X, formerly Twitter. The headlines were brutal. "The sun sets on Andrew Cross. Mistress mistake. The $500,000 typo. Violeta Cross emerges as the real power behind Helios. Lydia saw the cameras and instinctively posed, sucking in her cheeks. But then she realized the narrative wasn't in her favor. She wasn't the glamorous new girlfriend. She was the punchline. "I'm leaving," Lydia announced. She flagged down a yellow taxi that had slowed to gawk at the scene. "Lydia, wait!" Andrew pleaded, standing up. "Where are you going? We need to figure this out. We can go to your place." Lydia laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. "My place? My studio apartment in Queens with the 3 roommates? I don't think so, Andrew. You promised me a penthouse. You promised me a life. You delivered a cardboard box in the rain." She opened the taxi door. "But I love you!" Andrew yelled, the desperation cracking his voice. Lydia paused, one foot in the cab. She looked him up and down, wet, shivering, ruined. "You loved the way I looked at you," she said coldly. "And I loved the way you paid for things. I guess we're both out of luck." She slammed the door. The taxi sped off, splashing muddy water onto Andrew's trousers. Andrew stood alone on the corner of 61st and 5th. He had no money, no home, no wife, no mistress. And as he looked down at his phone, he saw a notification from LinkedIn. Violeta Cross has changed her status to CEO at Helios Ventures. The next morning, the financial world was in a frenzy. Violeta walked into the Helios headquarters at 8 a.m. sharp. She didn't use the back entrance. She walked through the main lobby. The staff, usually buzzing with morning chatter, fell silent as she passed. They had all seen the news. They knew the silent partner had awakened. She wore a navy blue suit, tailored to lethal precision. She didn't look like a woman scorned. She looked like a woman in charge. She took the elevator to the top floor, Andrew's floor. His office was exactly as he had left it, filled with expensive toys, a putting green, a vintage telescope, a framed jersey signed by Kobe Bryant. Violeta looked at it all with distaste. "Get rid of it," she said to the assistant, standing nervously in the doorway. "All of it, Mrs. Cross." "All of it. Donate the sports memorabilia to charity. Burn the furniture. I want this office stripped to the studs and repainted. White, minimalist." "Yes, ma'am." "And set up a town hall meeting for 10 a.m. I need to reassure the employees that their jobs are safe. The only fat we're trimming is at the very top." Violeta sat down at the mahogany desk, her desk now. She opened her laptop. Her email was flooded. Apologies from board members who claimed they had no idea about Andrew's behavior, meeting requests from investors, and one email from Novacorp. Subject: merger body. Violeta saw the news. "Bold move. We like bold. Let's close this deal on Friday. Price is up 10%. She allowed herself a small smile. She had just increased the company's valuation by $50 million by firing her husband. But the work wasn't done. She picked up the phone and dialed Beatrice. "Did you file the restraining order?" Violeta asked, without preamble. "Filed and granted." Beatrice's voice crackled over the line. "He's barred from coming within 500 feet of you, the office, or the Hamptons house. By the way, the locksmith's just finished at the townhouse. His key is useless." "Good. What about his assets?" "I froze the personal accounts pending the divorce audit. He has about $2,000 in a checking account that we couldn't touch because it predates the marriage. That's it." $2,000, Violeta mused. That should last him about a week in his world, or 2 months in the real world. Let's see how adaptable he is. "You're enjoying this," Beatrice noted. "I'm correcting a balance sheet, Beatrice. He was a liability. Now he's a write-off." 3 weeks later. The fall from grace is not a straight line. It is a series of humiliating bumps. For Andrew, The first week was denial. He stayed at a cheap hotel near the airport, convinced that Violetta would call. He thought she was teaching him a lesson and that eventually she would miss him. He waited for the phone to ring. It never did. The second week was anger. He tried to get a lawyer. He visited 4 top firms. They all turned him away. Conflict of interest, one said. We represent Vanguard Holdings on other matters, said another. Honestly, Mr. Cross, you can't afford us, said the third. He ended up with a strip mall attorney named Saul, who smelled of stale tobacco and worked out of a basement in New Jersey. Saul told him the prenup, which Andrew had signed 10 years ago without reading, thinking it was just a formality, was ironclad. She wrapped you up tight, kid, Saul had said, flipping through the pages. You get nothing. No alimony, no stock options, no property. And because of the embezzlement evidence, if you fight it, she can press criminal charges. My advice? Sign the papers and disappear. By the third week, the money ran out. Andrew was now living in a studio apartment in a rough part of the Bronx. It smelled of boiled cabbage and damp drywall. He was sleeping on a mattress he bought from a neighbor for $50. He had applied for jobs, CEO roles first, then VP roles, then director roles. No one called back. He was radioactive. A Google search of his name brought up the headlines about the mistress, the theft, and the public firing. He was a laughingstock. He sat on the edge of his mattress, eating instant noodles. He looked at the TV, a small, crackly set he found in the closet. On the screen, a news anchor was beaming. And in business news, Helios Ventures announced record profits today following their successful merger with Novacorp. The company's new CEO, Violetta Cross, was rang the opening bell at the NYSE this morning. There she was. Violetta. She looked radiant. She was laughing with the Novacorp executives. She looked younger, lighter. Andrew felt a physical pain in his chest. It wasn't heartbreak. It was the agonizing withdrawal of power. He missed the suits. He missed the drivers. He missed the respect. He needed to see her. He needed to convince her. He was charming, right? That was his gift. He could sell ice to an Eskimo. He just needed 5 minutes to sell himself back to his wife. He knew she had a routine. Every Friday evening, she went to Le Bernardin for a solo dinner. It was her sanctuary. He put on his suit. It was wrinkled, and there was a small stain on the lapel he couldn't get out. But it was the best he had. He used the last of his cash for a subway ticket, and then a taxi for the final few blocks, so he wouldn't arrive sweating. He waited outside the restaurant. The doorman recognized him, or rather, recognized who he used to be. Mr. Cross, the doorman said, blocking the entrance. I can't let you in. We have instructions. Just tell her I'm here, Jerry. Please, just 5 minutes. She knows you're here, the doorman said, looking past Andrew. Andrew turned. Violetta was walking out of the restaurant. She wasn't alone. She was flanked by 2 security guards and... Was that Cohen? The terrifying Israeli investigator? She stopped 10 feet away. She looked immaculate in a cream-colored trench coat. Andrew, she said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was indifferent. That was worse. Violetta. Andrew stepped forward, but Cohen stepped in front of him, a silent wall of muscle. Andrew stopped. Violetta, please, Andrew said, his hands open in a gesture of surrender. Look at me. I'm living in a hole. I have nothing. I've learned my lesson, okay? You win. You proved your point. You're the boss. I know, Violetta said. Take me back, Andrew begged. He fell to his knees on the sidewalk. Passers-by slowed down to watch, phones coming out to record the fallen king. I don't need to be CEO. I'll be anything. I'll work in the mail room. I can't live like this. We were partners, Viv. We built this." Violetta looked down at him. Her face was unreadable. "We didn't build anything, Andrew," she said softly. "I built a castle. You were just a guest who mistook the hospitality for ownership." "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm sorry about Lydia. I'm sorry about the money. I love you." Violetta sighed. She reached into her purse. Andrew's heart leaped. Was she getting her checkbook? Was she getting a key? She pulled out a small white envelope. She dropped it on the ground in front of his knees. "What is this?" he asked, staring at it. "A plane ticket," Violetta said. "One way. To Idaho." "Idaho? My family has a ranch there. It's remote, quiet. They need a hand to shovel the stables. Minimum wage, room and board included." Andrew stared at her in horror. "You want me to shovel? Manure? It's honest work, Andrew. Something you've never done in your life. It's the only offer on the table. You take the ticket, you get on the bus to the airport, and you disappear. Or you stay here in New York, and I release the rest of the audit files to the district attorney. They have a cell waiting for you at Rikers Island that makes your apartment in the Bronx look like the Ritz." She buttoned her coat. "You have 1 hour to decide. The bus leaves from Port Authority at 9:00 p.m. She turned to the doorman. "Jerry, call my car." "Violetta!" Andrew screamed as she walked away. "You can't do this. I'm your husband." She didn't look back. She got into the waiting black sedan. Andrew kneeled on the pavement, the white envelope staring up at him. The rain started to fall again, spotting the paper. He looked at the city around him, the lights, the cars, the expensive restaurants he could no longer enter. He looked at the envelope. Idaho. Or prison. His hands shaking, he reached out and picked up the ticket. 6 months later. The seasons had changed, and with them, the landscape of New York City's power hierarchy. The winter sludge had given way to a glorious, blooming spring. In the high-rise office of Helios Nova Corps, the air was cool and smelled of lilies. Violetta Cross stood at the window of her corner office, the office that was once Andrew's, now unrecognizable. The putting green was gone, replaced by a sleek, modern conference table. The telescope was gone, replaced by a shelf of architectural awards the company had won under her direct leadership. She wore a suit of pale lavender, a color she had never worn when Andrew was in charge, because he said it made her look washed out. Today she looked vibrant. Beatrice walked in, carrying a tablet. "The quarterly figures are in, Viv. We're up 18%. "Excellent," Violetta said, turning from the view. "And the Valkyrie initiative?" "Fully funded," Beatrice smiled. "We've launched the scholarship program for female entrepreneurs. The first cohort starts next month. You're changing the game, Viv. You're not just funding companies, you're building an army." Violetta sat at her desk, running a hand over the smooth surface. "It's amazing what you can get done when you aren't spending half your energy managing a fragile ego." "Speaking of fragile egos," Beatrice hesitated, tapping the screen of her tablet. "Cohen sent his final update report. Do you want to see it, or should I shred it?" Violetta paused. "Let me see." Beatrice handed over the tablet. On the screen was a grainy photo taken from a distance. It showed a man in muddy coveralls leaning against a wooden fence. He looked older. His hair was longer, unkempt, and grey at the temples. He was holding a shovel. It was Andrew. He was at the ranch in Idaho, just as she had commanded. The report detailed his life, up at 4:30 a.m. to feed the horses, mucking out stalls until noon, fixing fences in the afternoon. He lived in a bunkhouse with 3 other hands who didn't know or care that he used to wear Italian suits. He made minimum wage. He had no internet access. "He looks tired," Violetta noted, her voice devoid of pity. "He's working," Beatrice said. "Cohen says he hasn't tried to leave. He hasn't called anyone. I think he finally realized that the fence line is the only thing keeping him out of a jail cell." Violetta swiped to the next photo. It was of Lydia. The mistress hadn't fared much better. The photo showed her standing behind a counter at a discount cosmetic store in a mall in New Jersey. She was wearing a smock that was 2 sizes too big. She looked bored and bitter. The caption noted that she had been fired from 3 previous jobs after her employers Googled her name and found the articles about the embezzlement. The internet never forgets. She was unhireable in any role that required trust. Violetta handed the tablet back. "Close the file, Beatrice. I don't need updates anymore. They are ghosts." "Done," Beatrice said, deleting the file with a tap. "Oh, and Viv, there's someone waiting for you in the lobby." "Mr. Sterling." "Wait, no, not Sterling. Mr. Donovan, the architect from the new eco project." "Send him up in 5 minutes," Violetta said. As Beatrice left, Violetta walked back to the window. She looked out at the city she now truly owned. For 10 years she had played the role of the shadow. She had convinced herself that love meant making someone else shine while she held the flashlight. She had believed that being the good wife meant making herself smaller so her husband could feel big. She touched the glass, watching the cars move like ants 40 stories below. She realized now that the mistress, Lydia, hadn't destroyed her marriage. Lydia had simply exposed the cracks in the foundation. Lydia had done her a favor. She had set the house on fire, forcing Violetta to run out and realize she was fireproof. Violetta checked her reflection in the glass. She didn't see a victim. She didn't see a divorcee. She saw the CEO. She saw the architect. She saw the victor. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Donovan is here, Ms. Cross." Violetta straightened her jacket. She walked to the door, opening it herself. "Let's get to work," she said. The door closed, shutting out the past, leaving only the future. And for the first time in her life, the future belonged entirely to her. And that is the story of how Violetta Cross turned a heartbreaking betrayal into the ultimate corporate takeover. Andrew and Lydia thought they held all the cards: youth, arrogance, and deception. But they forgot the most important rule of the game. Never underestimate the person who built the table you're playing on. Violetta didn't just win. She rewrote the rules, proving that true power isn't about who shouts the loudest, but about who holds the keys when the locks are changed. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes revenge and justice served cold, please take a moment to like this video. It really helps the channel grow. Share this with a friend who needs a reminder of their own worth. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have plenty more tales of underdogs rising up coming your way. Thanks for listening.